You feel a warm breath of air against your face, a dry breeze laced with the scent of dust and spices. You open your eyes, sit up, and find yourself in a rough canvas tent in the middle of the Egyptian desert in ancient times. Outside, the sun hasn't fully risen, but the heat has already seeped through every seam. You hear the clatter of camels' hooves, and in the distance, a prayer echoes from the temple of Isis. Here, sleep is not a private matter. You sleep alongside your family, sometimes even with small livestock. Children sprawl across woven mats. Adults lie side by side, heads resting on their arms. Mattresses, none. Pillows, just a rectangular block of stone, no joke. The ancient Egyptians believed that a high headrest kept the soul from drifting away during sleep. And you thought hugging a pillow was weird? A strange fact. Pharaohs wore makeup before going to bed, not for beauty, but to ward off demons. The black coal around the eyes wasn't just cosmetic, it was a magical barrier. Because in Egyptian belief, sleep was a perilous journey. Your soul left your body, wandered through the spirit world, and if you weren't careful, it might never return. You hear tales of the Ba, the part of the soul that flies from your body as you sleep, like a bird with a human head. And the Ka, the part that stays behind waiting to be reunited come morning. If the Ba didn't return in time, you didn't wake up. That's why people placed amulets under their beds or drew the Ankh, the symbol of life, on the bed frame. Historians still debate whether the ancient Egyptians truly believed in prophetic dreams or simply used them as metaphors. But there's no denying they recorded dreams more seriously than you jot down tomorrow's to-do list. There were even official dream interpretation manuals kept in temple libraries. If you dreamt of flying fish, it didn't mean you had a late-night snack. It might be a sign of a failed harvest. Sleep here always came with ritual. Before bed, you washed your hands, rubbed lotus oil on your temples, and lay on your left side, mimicking the posture of gods sleeping. In their tombs, to Egyptians, death was just a very long sleep, and every night's rest was a small rehearsal for eternity. You step into the tomb of a priest, not to rob it, don't worry, but to witness how sacred sleep was to the ancients. On the walls are intricate paintings of beautiful dreams, where the dead meet Osiris, drink from the Nile in visions, and embrace loved ones long gone. No alarm clocks, no deadlines, just eternal peace like a Sunday that never ends. Then you notice a curious detail. The dead are not laid flat. They are placed on their sides, hands crossed over their chests, as if sleeping. It's not just a burial position. It's a gesture of hope, that one day they will wake up in another world, where all the beautiful dreams come true. Meanwhile, in cities like Thebes or Memphis, the middle class lived in cramped quarters and sleeping. Space was often the rooftop. In summer, no one could stand being indoors, so you'd see people bringing mats upstairs, carrying water jugs, and sleeping beneath the stars. No walls, no doors, just the vast sky and the chill of night. If you've ever camped outdoors, this is the dry season edition. For months on end, an old joke etched into Egyptian pottery goes, "The husband sleeps like a mummy, the wife turns like a wheel." Apparently, blanket stealing has always been a thing. You drift back to the present for a moment and feel your memory foam pillow as a kind of blessing. But you also realize something. Ancient sleep wasn't separated from life. It wasn't boxed into a closed room or squeezed between two calendar meetings. It was part of the cosmos, where gods entered your dreams, and death was simply asleep with no alarm clock. You exhale gently, eyes closing, and imagine yourself as a bob bird gliding out of the room, floating over the dreamy Nile, then landing in a field where time doesn't exist. There, everyone sleeps well. No one screams over missed deadlines. And certainly no one uses a minion's alarm clock. You wake with a start on a cold autumn night. the sound of horse hooves echoing on cobblestones drifting in from afar. As you open your eyes, the pale moonlight spills through a small window, illuminating a modest wooden room, low, damp, and bone-chillingly cold. You've been taken back to a small farm in central France in the 18th century, a time when sleep began to split in two. By now, you're no stranger to this. People in the past didn't sleep in one continuous stretch like we do. They divided sleep into two parts. The first sleep began around 8 p.m. and lasted until about midnight. After that, people would wake up and stay up for an hour or two before returning to their second sleep. You rise from the straw mattress, the crackling of embers in the hearth clearly audible. During that waking period between the two sleeps, what did people do? All sorts of things. Prayed, mended clothes, read, if they were wealthy enough to afford candles, or simply whispered to one another. Sometimes those whispers turned to laughter, then to soft moans, and finally to a suggestive silence. Historians call this the intimate hour, a quiet lull between two bouts of slumber. Here's a little-known truth. In many rural parts of France, children were taught to split their sleep from an early age as a rite of passage. Sleeping through the night in one go was seen as lazy, only for those with nothing useful to do in the middle of the night. And you thought waking at 5 a.m. made you productive. Historians still debate whether segmented sleep was widespread across Europe or mainly a feature of agrarian regions. But you can feel it. Your body, once freed from phones and LED lights, begins to follow the rhythm of natural darkness. Sleepiness comes earlier. Waking in the middle of the night feels calm. No anxiety, no buzzing alarms. You step outside, the moon casting its glow over a mist-covered field. An elderly couple sits side by side, hands intertwined, saying nothing. Just being, suspended between two worlds, between sleep and wakefulness, between yesterday and tomorrow. And you realize sometimes waking at 2 a.m. isn't a disorder, it's stillness. Back in the house, you're lying in a room, shared by 3 generations on a large communal bed. No one has their own room. No one locks their doors. That's why you sleep as if on a train, hearing every breath, every rustle, every drowsy murmur of the person beside you. Privacy was a luxury, but closeness was infinite. Still, with that closeness came nighttime fears. Children were told that if they slept in the wrong position, on their stomachs, arms too wide, the demon Genevieve would enter their dreams and pull out their souls. Think Freddy Krueger, but in a wool cloak and speaking Occitan. Some mothers hung laurel, wreaths on the bed frame, not for decoration, but to ward off spirits. If you've ever used essential oils for sleep, this was the pre-industrial version. You hear a folk tale. A sleepwalker who wandered out of his home in the night walked straight into the river, and when they found him the next morning, he was still standing there, eyes closed, feet sunken in mud, as if dreaming while awake. No one dared wake him, for they believed to call a sleepwalker by their real name would cause their soul to be lost forever. You shiver slightly, not from fear, but because you understand. Sleep in those days wasn't something you owned. It was a place you passed through, a realm with its own rules, its blurred boundaries, and its strange inhabitants. By the end of the century, as artificial lighting spread, the habit of segmented sleep began to fade. Big cities like Paris, Lyon, and Bordeaux lit up their streets. And when the night was no longer truly dark, people no longer slept the same. Two-phase sleep slipped from memory, like an old friend you once knew deeply, but can no longer name. You return to the bed listening to the soft breathing beside you. You can't quite remember who's sleeping next to you in this part of your memory. Maybe a grandmother, a friend, or simply a version of yourself from another life. But you know one thing for certain. Once upon a time, between two closures of the eyelids, people found belief, fear, and comfort, and you realize, too, waking in the middle of the night isn't a mistake. Sometimes it's a chance to whisper to yourself, to lay your hand on your chest and ask what your heart is dreaming. Then, gently, you exhale and slip into the second sleep, like a traveler returning home after a brief stop on the road. You jolt awake to the sound of a ding, a brass bell ringing somewhere down the street, not an alarm clock, but the curfew bell. You're in 17th century London, a city cloaked in smoke, dust, and the lingering dread of a plague just past, and about to stumble into a great fire. You're standing in a cramped lodging room, wooden walls and a ceiling so low you could touch it with an outstretched hand. On the narrow bed lies a rumpled sheet, and what people of the time called a mattress, really just a cloth sack stuffed with straw, or if luck failed you, hay riddled with bugs. Of course, the blanket is coarse wool. And if you turn and spot a cockroach, congratulations, you're experiencing the noble sleep of the Stuart era. But amid this roughness, strange ideas began to emerge. Efficient sleep, the sleep of virtue, and even stranger, sleep as a measure of character. During this period, philosopher John Locke wrote that children should be trained to sleep on bare wooden floors to acquaint them with hardship. Can you imagine the PR pitch for a stone mattress? Awaken the grit within, a curious truth. Some people were paid just to wake others up. They were called knocker-uppers, using long sticks to tap on customers' windows at the appointed hour. Without them, you might oversleep and miss your own hanging if you were a condemned criminal. Yes, punctuality could be a matter of life and death. Historians still debate how many hours people actually slept during this time, as diaries record plenty of activity in the middle of the night, from prayer and letter writing to philosophical discussions. Some nobles even hosted midnight feasts with cold meats, weak beer, and poetry readings by flickering oil lamps. If you think working at night is a modern invention, you've clearly never been jolted awake at 2 a.m. by metaphysical poetry. You step out onto the street, the cobblestones slick with dew, where night watchmen still cry out, 3 o'clock, all's well. Part announcement, part lullaby. A kind of public ASMR if you think about it. Sadly, no one was live streaming it on TikTok. Then it strikes you. The idea of a private bed was still novel for the middle class. Many people rented bed by the hour. They called it bed share. Not romantic, just too poor to afford a whole night. If you've ever tried co-living, meet your ancestors, except they bunked beside a cobbler instead of a startup engineer. Yet in wealthier homes, the bed was the center of ceremony. Beds were placed in the middle of the room, canopied on all sides, embroidered with the family name. When someone died, they lay there, surrounded by family and mourners. The bed was not just for sleep. It was a place of birth, of death, of negotiation, and sometimes of war declarations. IKEA still has a ways to go in terms of multifunctionality. Another memorable point, 17th century Brits deeply believed that dreams were prophetic. Dreaming of losing teeth? Not a dentist issue. Someone is going to die. Dreaming of clear water? Good news. Murky water? Imprisonment may loom. Entire guides existed on how to cleanse the mind before sleep to avoid nightmares, including reading psalms, drinking peppermint tea, and avoiding cheese after 6 p.m. Cheese to them was the gateway to horror. You step into a 2-story wooden house where a mother is lulling her child with a faint lullaby about an owl flying over the rooftop. If the owl hoots 3 times, your father won't come home. Peaceful and terrifying. You lie back on the straw bed, your body heavy, not from discomfort but from sensing the frantic, uncertain rhythm of a city struggling with plague and dreams alike. Sleep is no longer a haven. It's a battleground of spirit, faith, and the fear of being awakened too soon. And yet, amid it all, your heart softens as the church bell tolls 4 times, like a giant heartbeat echoing through the city. No one sleeps soundly, but everyone sleeps, each in their own way. You wake up in a setting so luxurious that even your dreams feel underdressed. A gilded ceiling, deep red velvet curtains cascading from the high roof to the floor, and a bed so enormous you could hold 3 separate meetings on its corners. Welcome to Versailles, the 18th century, the golden age of power sleep. Or rather, sleep with an audience. You're in the bedchamber of Louis XIV, the Sun King, and if you think your morning routine is complicated, coffee, emails, missing socks, you've never witnessed the royal lever, the king's waking ceremony. Louis didn't just wake up. He was raised from slumber. At around 8 a.m., dozens of courtiers would line up outside the room, waiting their turn to enter. One would hand him a face cloth, another would select his stockings, and the luckiest of all would fasten the first button of his shirt. And there you stand amidst envious glances as Louis opens his eyes, and the entire room bows. Yes, waking up at Versailles was a privilege of political magnitude. A little-known fact, Louis XIV owned over 400 beds across his various palaces, but he only actually slept in a few of them. The rest were for posing, resting, or simply making people think he was there. A kind of proxy bed, you might call it. Clearly, the idea of working from bed wasn't born yesterday. Historians still debate how much Louis actually slept. His personal diaries are filled with late-night meetings, banquets, and time allotted to lovers. Yet, even if he slept little, he wanted the world to know every time he closed his eyes it was an act of governance. You sleep to rest. He slept to rule. You lie on his bed just to try it, and you realize it's not soft at all. The mattress is firm, the pillows tall, and everything is embroidered in silk so fine you feel like you might be defiling cultural heritage just by sweating. But that was the point. The king's bed wasn't meant for comfort. It was a symbol, much like your shoe collection, not necessarily made for walking. You step into the hallway and see a maid dusting the wall. Every bedroom in the palace had a dedicated pillow attendant, a blanket supervisor, and even someone in charge of the scent. Yes, there was a person whose job it was to perfume the sheets. That person may not have been literate, but they could tell real Provençal lavender from the cheap stuff from Grasse. At the time, sleep was a reflection of status. If you slept in utter silence, behind drawn curtains, under watchful guards, you were nobility. If you slept on the floor in the marketplace under an oil lamp, you were merely a part of the city. Versailles built an entire sleep system to reinforce that message. The king's slumber was a performance. And you're watching from the front row. Here's a funny thing. For all Versailles' grandeur, it lacked proper plumbing. So, in the middle of the night, if a noble needed the bathroom, they might knock on another bedroom to borrow a chamber pot. Sometimes the most royal of sleeps was disturbed by the clatter of a very dignified emergency. You pass a smaller room, the maids' quarters. They lie huddled on straw beds, some still in their dresses, combs still in hand. Sleep was merely a pause in their service. No one spoke of dreaming. It was just a way to forget aching feet. You wonder, how did Marie Antoinette sleep? She had her own bed, of course. But truth be told, with so many courtly rules, she often had to pretend to sleep, or not sleep, to demonstrate noble alertness. It was once written, she woke as if she had never closed her eyes. A standard too high for anyone, unless you're a robot. You lie down again, this time on a courtier's bed, not too large, not too stiff. And here you find something absent from the king's mattress, a gently pressed pillow, a neatly folded blanket, and a faint scent of faded rose. You know you've lain where someone once truly dreamed, not for show, but for themselves. Then you close your eyes, imagining a Versailles without candlelight or fanfare. Only the breath of a sleeping palace remains. All the layers of class, intrigue, and elaborate language soften into a single, slow heartbeat. Even the sun must set to make way for night. You turn over, and this time wake up to the scent of smoke and coffee, but not the smoke of war. This one is tobacco, parchment, and revolution. Paris, late 18th century, and you are at the heart of the historical storm, the French Revolution. Wooden clogs echo on cobbled streets, political debates hum through every salon, and above, lace curtains flutter like whispers from a society on the verge of collapse. You're lying in the bedroom of a very famous woman. Though, at this point, few dare say her name aloud, Marie Antoinette, the queen of aesthetics and scandal, once crowned with wigs tall enough for birds to nest in, and the woman, rumor has it, who was nearly captured simply for wearing too much lace. A true event. In October 1789, a crowd of women marched from Paris to the Palace of Versailles in hunger and fury. They stormed into the Queen's bedroom, overturning everything. What shocked them wasn't treasure, it was lingerie. Ribbons, silks, lace, so extravagant you could trade them for a small apartment. No kitchen, but still. Your fingers graze the bed sheets, so smooth it feels like stroking the palm of a supernatural midwife. Marie's bed was built like oddest, a tiny stage raised from the ground with steps leading up, always facing outward. Why? Because even while sleeping, she was watched. Public waking wasn't just for kings. The Queen, too, had her own lever de la reine, a traditional waking ceremony before the court's eyes. A strange truth. Marie was harshly criticized for wearing a simple white cotton dress. The chemise à la reine, though plain, outraged the aristocracy for making her look like a servant. Odd, isn't it? That in that era, a powerful woman dressing comfortably was considered revolutionary. You in your bear print. Pajamas aren't quite shaking the monarchy, but still. Historians still debate whether Marie truly understood what was happening or was simply lost in her silk-draped fantasies. Some say she was too dreamy to grasp the danger. Others believe she knew, but couldn't escape the crushing gears of the royal machine. You walk down the hallway, the dry clack of guards' boots echoing off the walls. In a small room nearby, royal soldiers take turns napping on makeshift wooden beds. No curtains, no mattresses. They sleep short, an hour, maybe two, then rise again to patrol. Back then, sleep wasn't rest. It was the shortest way to outrun exhaustion. In the streets of Paris, you step into an ordinary home. A low ceiling, a small room, one chair, and a sleeping spot shared by 3 people. A mother hums a lullaby to her baby. Tiny domino of mine, don't fear the gunshots. Outside are the hammers of the guillotine and the horns of death. But inside, sleep is still sacred. The sleep of the poor, though thin and cold, still holds dignity. And then there are nights, like Marie's last. At the conciergerie prison, when sleep becomes a luxury. In a cold stone room, no mattress, no silk, only straw spread on the floor. She sits in silence. No one knows if she truly slept, or just closed her eyes to escape the revolution's unblinking stare. You picture it, the woman who once wore wigs, heavier than wedding cakes, who once slept on hand-embroidered cushions, now curled up like any other forgotten soul. In those final nights, no lavender, no golden-threaded nightgowns, just broken breaths, like someone counting down the last moments of freedom. An unbelievable fact. When she was executed, she held herself with such grace that the crowd paused, not out of forgiveness, but because they saw not everyone can die as a symbol. And the way she stepped onto the scaffold after so many sleepless nights proved one thing. Sometimes your final pride lies in not asking for 5 more minutes. You sigh, return to bed, and realize you're still lying in that golden bedroom. But something has changed. Dust veils the curtains, the pillow has sunken, and morning light crawls through the window like a frail finger. Versailles is no longer a fortress of dreams. It is a tomb for a sleep that never found peace.